Welcome back to Face the Nation. We go now to the chair of the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. That's New York Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
I want to start where we just left off with our other guests. How concerned are you about the risk of political violence? And can you say unequivocally that you and your fellow Democrats will accept the outcome of your elections?
Of course we'll accept the outcome of the elections. Always have, always will. And we're very concerned about the integrity of our elections, especially when people are trying to intimidate people with weapons, when they're engaged in these tactics to try to undermine confidence. No, we're going to accept the results of the election. That's the American way.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because there's been a lot of attention drawn to comments by some Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, who just released a taped statement online where she was talking about upcoming elections. And she said right-wing extremists already have a plan to literally steal the next presidential election, and they're not making a secret of it. I understand hyperbole, but would you agree that that's not helpful in the current environment to talk about plots to steal elections?
Yeah, no, I don't understand what that means, and I didn't see the comment. Let me tell you what I think. What I think is that it's perfectly legitimate for both parties to make sure that voting is fair, that there's no fraud, that when votes are cast, that the people have a right to cast them or don't, and that's normal. And in a close election, you might have a recount, you might have other examination of absentee ballots. That's all run-of-the-mill stuff. What's different is people showing up with weapons and sitting in the back of a pickup truck next to a drop box trying to scare the tar out of people who are just exercising their vote. What's different is when a president, for the first time in our history, says he was cheated out of the results when he knows that's a lie. So let's not pretend for a minute that both sides have the same amount of accountability for the loss of confidence in our elections. One side has been out there for a couple of years now doing everything they can to pretend Joe Biden didn't win fair and square when he did. And that's the difference.
On that topic, Democrats shelled out about $53 million to support 13 Republican candidates during the primaries. I know you're part of strategy here, and the strategy was to elevate less electable Republicans in order to benefit Democrats. And some of this worked for you, but in at least 2 races, these guys have realistic shots at victory. I'm looking at John Gibbs in Michigan, for example. Do you take responsibility for helping election deniers?
Well, at the DCCC, there's only one race in the country, one, where we engaged in the tactic you're talking about. And what we did was we ran an ad that's true that said he's too extreme for Western Michigan, and we ran that general election ad about 2 weeks early. And Hillary Scholten has been beating him consistently since she became our nominee. She's a strong pro-choice Democrat.
So you stand by the strategy,
and she's gonna beat him. What I can tell you is that in a budget of $340 million, we spent about $400,000 running a true general election commercial 2 weeks early, calling John Gibbs an extremist, which he is. And that's all you're talking about. Now, I can't answer to what governors did or what senators did or what other people did. But the committee I ran, in a budget of $300 million, put $400,000 into speeding up a general election ad that was truthful, and we're going to win that race.
The top 3 issues when we talk to voters that they tell us they're concerned about are economy, inflation, and crime. Half of voters, according to our poll, think Democrats would cut police funding. Now, I saw an ad the DCCC just bought in your district, and it opens with you talking to a policeman. You are keenly aware of this. Why hasn't your party been able to shake that perception of being soft on crime?
Well, because a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth gets its shoes on, as the saying goes. In my own case, I've brought $7 million for local police departments, supported the Invest to Protect Act, which will fund all the police departments in my district, all under 125 officers. That's the most important support we've done for police in 30 years. And if you care about rising crime, my goodness, we should listen to police who are begging us to do something about the gun violence, which is at the heart of so much rising crime. And of course, the MAGA crowd is in the pocket of the NRA and won't touch common safe bipartisan gun safety legislation, which we passed through the House. So we have a record of results supporting good policing and going after gun violence, and that's what people need to know.
In our poll, 46% of voters believe Republicans' economic policies will help them. Only 40% say the same about Democrats. 53% of voters believe gas prices will go up under Democrats. 21% say the same of the GOP. I mean, since you're talking strategy here in these closing days, how do you change these perception and how do you get out younger voters?
Right. Well, what people need to know is that we have a plan for cheaper gas, cheaper groceries, cheaper housing, cheaper health care. We have a plan for safer streets, supporting good policing, and attacking gun violence, which is so much of the problem, and supporting our freedoms, our reproductive freedoms, and our voting rights. And those are real plans. Now, you can take a poll and you can take a snapshot at any given time. But of course, your former guest had no plan for the economy. They have no plan for gun violence. They have no plan to move our country forward, protecting voting rights, protecting reproductive freedoms. So what I would say is don't punish the people who are fixing your problems, and don't reward the people who are trying to exploit the problems for their own political power. That's really the difference right now. We're engaged in the hard work of bringing our country forward. The other side's working on their own power.
Congressman, thank you for your time this morning. We'll be right back. We want to take a closer look at some of our Battleground Tracker findings and the issues that are setting the mood in America in these final days of Campaign 22. Mark Strassman reports from Los Angeles.
America's zeitgeist, vulnerability, like this home invasion hammer attack on a politician's 82-year-old spouse, reinforcing we're an anxious, often resentful bunch heading into midterms.
Now with Joe Biden, there's a big thumb on top of you where you can't enjoy yourself.
I just need to see some peace, and I think the only way to do this is voting.
The economy, especially inflation, indisputably top of mind in voter anxiety.
Cost of groceries are outrageous. Utilities are outrageous. It keeps going up.
And gas prices. Look at these in Los Angeles, right at $7 a gallon for regular. That would be nightmarish in most of the country, but here in LA, prices have actually been coming down in the last couple weeks. In our latest CBS News poll of registered voters, a majority blame President Biden and the Democrats for the economy and gas prices. The president's fighting that perception.
Unemployment is not 6.5, but 3.5%, the lowest it's been in 50 years.
Republicans see inflation numbers and smell blood.
Not just a red wave, but a red tsunami.
Crime is another voter worry, like last week's deadly school shooting in St. Louis, the 40th this year involving injuries or deaths. In major cities, murder rates and shootings both down slightly, but from a 30% spike 2 years ago. Our poll shows Republicans have a double-digit lead on crime policies to make you feel safer. But American voters want this election cycle of leadership to confront other challenges: immigration, an infectious disease trifecta, COVID, the flu, and RSV, gun policy, and abortion in a post-Roe America. Our poll says a majority of voters think Republicans will pass a national abortion ban. Another worry, culture wars invading the classroom and performance that's plummeting. It's one more challenge calling out for grown-up intervention, as millions of Americans now vote for their idea of a grown-up, knowing that whoever wins, half the country will resent it. Again.
Mark Strassman reporting from Los Angeles. Our new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows Republicans still have an edge in the race for control of the House. CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto is here. Anthony, tell us more.
Good morning, Margaret. You know, we've been talking to voters throughout this campaign in all the congressional districts. Right now, our latest CBS News estimate is that the Republicans lead in 228 districts. That is enough to take the House majority. Now, there is a range around these estimates. Let me show you the political implications here. They really center around turnout. You might ask, do Democrats have any chance to hang on even to a slim House majority? The answer to that starts with the possibility that they'd get bigger turnout from younger voters. If voters show up the way they did in, say, 2018, that could get the Democrats a little bit closer, make the House effectively even. The trouble for them is we have not seen strong indications that that is going to happen. The more likely scenario is that Republicans, who do have an expressed turnout advantage, more motivation, more enthusiasm so far, if their turnout advantage grows, we plug that into the model, and that would get the Republicans up to 238 seats, a slightly larger majority. Now, in any case, we're looking at a seat gain here for the Republicans that's about or even below average for a party out of power. You might ask why that is, especially given the concerns about the state of the country and the state of the economy. Let me show you a split that I think tells a lot of the tale. I asked people, which concerns you more, whether or not the U.S. is going to have a functioning democracy or whether it's going to have a strong economy? And the results are somewhat split. But look at the voting differences here. Those who are more concerned about functioning of democracy, voting for Democrats. Those more concerned about the strong economy, voting for Republicans. And I think that defines the way that voters see the very large stakes here and the way the parties are expressing those stakes, which is partly why this race is so locked in, Margaret.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you. And we'll be right back. For more now, we turn to our political panel. Amy Walter, publisher and editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. Senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe is here. And Nick Timiraos, chief economics correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, is also at the table. Good morning to all of you. So, Amy, we just heard Anthony's scenario here. This is not a red wave, but it is a Republican majority. Does it match with what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the way that Anthony pointed it out is a very smart way of thinking about this. You know, elections, normal midterm elections, the challenge for the in-party usually is that their own side doesn't turn out. And that's where the other side is much more motivated. And when you see those big, big gains, like we saw, say, in 1994 or 2010 on the part of Republicans, this year we're seeing that Republicans and Democrats are motivated, Republicans a little bit more, but Democrats feel pretty good that they're at least getting more of their base turned out. Now, young voters being always a challenge for Democrats. But look, I think what happened over the course of the summer is that the issues surrounding abortion rights, plus the focus on Donald Trump, January 6th, and quite frankly, a little better of an economic picture, gave some boost of enthusiasm to Democrats and got them energized in terms of the voters, more energized to turn out. But it feels as if that has pretty much stalled, that it hit this point and it hasn't really gone much further. And instead, where the focus is now, it's no longer as much about abortion or Donald Trump and much more about the things that Anthony pointed out, which is the economy, gas prices, and people feeling, quite frankly, pretty stuck.
Mm-hmm. And we frame this as, you know, sort of a choice with state of the economy and state of democracy. And Ed, in some of these recent political ads, I'm thinking about in Maloney's district, I was just watching one, they're changing the focus to be about extremism.
Yeah.
So not even talking about the affirmative case, but fear the other side.
Right. Not only in the realm of democracy and those concerns, but in the realm of abortion rights and Social Security and Medicare being ripped up or rethought. I watched Maloney this week actually make that exact argument to a bunch of seniors in an assisted living facility. He says, if you don't think they might come after your Social Security and Medicare, look what they just did to abortion rights after 50 years of threatening to do it. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a way to make both arguments at the same time, but not make an explicit abortion argument. And that's the kind of pivoting that they've done here, now realizing that abortion isn't as urgent an issue. Part of the reason, one Republican I talked to this week said, look, you go look at mothers across the country who may be concerned about abortion rights, but they're not necessarily bumping up against the issue of abortion rights every day. They're bumping up against the fact that beef is costing 3 times as much as it did before. And those more urgent economic issues may be what's drawing people back over to the Republican side.
I want to come back to the issue of abortion in a second, but Nick, can you pick up on this? Because our poll shows 69% of voters describe the condition of the national economy as bad. Only 27% say it's good. You've got a piece saying, out in the Journal, saying basically American consumers are doing pretty well. Yeah. So Why don't they feel that way?
Yeah, that's a great question, Margaret. You know, the issue here is that if you look at the labor market, 3.5% unemployment rate, what's not to like about that? But if you look at, what's happening with wages, they are not keeping up with prices. We had another report Friday that shows that Americans' wages are not keeping up with prices. And so those real income cuts, nobody likes that. You drive by the gas station, you see how expensive gas is, and you look at what's happening right now with interest rates. They've gone up a lot this year. Mortgage rates this week are above 7%. For the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage. We haven't seen that since 2001. So, yes, on paper, there are things you can point to that look great, but people just don't feel great about it.
And we have this Fed meeting in the coming days. What are the conversations inside the Federal Reserve right now about when inflation gets better and what they plan to do?
Well, the problem for the Fed is that monetary policy takes time. It acts with a delay on the economy, so you can't see your moves right away. The Fed this year has raised interest rates at the fastest pace since the 1980s. Normally, they raise rates by a quarter point every 6 weeks or so. This year, they've been going at 0.75 of a percentage point. And when you don't have time to see how that influences the economy, it's like barreling down the highway, but using the rearview mirror to guide where you're going. It raises the risk that you're going to drive off the road. And the problem here for the Fed is they can't take a risk of not getting on top of this inflation, because even though the risk of doing too much is a recession, the risk of not doing enough is that inflation just stays high and you have to have a bigger downturn later.
And I mean, those are the details of it. That is monetary policy. What is it that Republicans are actually arguing, Ed, they can do? Because really, the reality is their hands are pretty tied here.
They are. If you read their websites, if you listen to what they say, they want to cut government spending. And in some cases, they want to see implementation of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That either they voted for or they don't want to admit that will help their districts, even if they voted against it. And go ahead.
Well, and that's the bottom line. When you're in charge and things are going well, you get the credit, a lot of which you don't deserve. When you're in charge and things aren't going well, you get the blame, even if you don't deserve all of it. And when you're the out party, you get the benefit of the doubt, because voters are saying, well, I don't know if Ed can really fix this, but these folks who are in charge, they're not doing a very good job. Let's just give them a shot, which is why Democrats are doing the extremism thing. If people are upset with the status quo, which they clearly are, Democrats' only chance to hold on, especially in some of these Senate races, is to say the bigger risk is taking a risk on the other side. Staying with the status quo you don't like is uncomfortable, but not as bad.
And the other ironic thing, much like the Fed, the problem for the Biden administration and Democrats is a lot of their accomplishments are going to take time to be implemented. Right. The Medicare price cuts don't kick in until next year. The bridge isn't getting rebuilt until early 2024. Right. So they can talk about all these things in the abstract, but the voter can't see it yet. The president may know, come my re-election, if I'm running in 2024, people will see what I did, but they won't be able to see it before November 8th.
It's also kind of hard sometimes to message around market forces. An energy analyst that I speak to was pointing out, Ron Klain, the chief of staff to the president, tweets almost daily about the price of gas. He's like, why are they trying to own something they cannot control?
That is a question that the White House chief of staff is going to have to answer for. And not only is why are they tweeting about something that they can't control, why is he tweeting so much to begin with every morning about this and other issues when he perhaps should be running the White House? I've heard this from Democrats. I think we'll hear it a lot more from Democrats after the election if it goes south for them. It is an obsession for them because they know it is the psychological and the sort of data barometer that we've all used to measure inflation and the discussion about the economy. But yeah, it is something completely out of their control. And perhaps by doing that, it's, as that energy analyst noted, it may have drawn too much attention to the president and allows him to take more of the blame.
You have, Nick, in the Journal, a survey of economists putting the probability of recession over the next 12 months at 63%. So that is the Congress that Republicans would be walking in to control.
Yeah, and the issue here is the economy is slowing. We knew it was going to slow because we had a boom last year. But if it doesn't slow enough, if consumers keep spending the savings that they've accrued during the pandemic, then that just means the Fed is going to come in and raise interest rates more. This week we're going to get close to 4% on the policy rate that the Fed sets, but we could go closer to 5% next year. And there's a Fed chairman who used to say that it was the Fed's job to take the punch bowl away as the party was getting started. And that's what you're seeing this year. But if consumers keep spending money, we had very solid earnings reports this past week from United, Visa, Coca-Cola. If consumers keep spending, then Jay Powell's going to get on the phone and call the cops and say, we got to get the noise volume down in here. We got to get these people to go home, because this is just not sustainable to have inflation continuing to run higher and higher and higher.
And it's hard to explain sometimes that some things are going to get more expensive by design. It's going to get more expensive for you to borrow money because of what's happening. Coming back to the issue of abortion, Amy and Ed, I think it's interesting that the dynamics seems to have changed on this in terms of bringing out voters. You were saying, Ed, that people feel inflation perhaps as a more immediate crisis than abortion access. I wonder, Amy, because it's so different state by state.
Right. That's what we're. It's quite interesting, actually, where we're seeing Democratic, especially candidates for the House, having the most trouble is actually in blue states like Oregon, California, places where the issue of abortion is pretty well settled. Right. These are Democratic-run states. It's not an existential question.
Because the state has already
either codified or it's Democratic, and the governor's candidates have all pledged to go forward in that way. It's the red and purple states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, where we know that this issue is not settled, and where in Michigan, of course, they have a ballot initiative as well as a governor's race. You have governor's races in those other states. So there's much more of a friction there, right, about the decision being determined by your vote this November. That's not as apparent in some of these blue states.
Yeah, and the fact that they have to run into New York, Oregon, the president's going to New Mexico this week, it all speaks to the fact that perhaps they may have miscalculated how abortion would work in those states, and how much money Republicans have to spend right now in the closing weeks to really put a bunch of Democrats on the ropes.
Good to have all three of you here. Thank you very much. And that's going to do it for us here at Face the Nation today. Thank you for watching, and tune in next Tuesday, Election Day. I can't believe that. Wow.
I can't believe you just said that.
And night, starting at 5 p.m. on our streaming network with a special edition of Red and Blue. And we'll be on both the broadcast and streaming network starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time through the night and into the morning. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.